The other wee part to what Pam was saying there as well is I'm sure there would not be any sympathy for me, but it's getting harder and harder almost to do digital learning and teaching, because I feel that there was obviously a point where we were, and Pam have been in the same boat, where you had to try and encourage people or promote the use of digital. But now that everybody's using it, we've taken so many strides forward, and it was almost, what have we not covered yet? And again, when I have a check in the teams and I see some of the conversations that are going on, and when we've presented and previously, and get sort of feedback from people, and you kind of start to realise that everybody's taking such a huge step forward with their digital learning, that what I don't want to do is talk about Office and G Suite necessarily again, because I'm sure that's the sort of thing that people are now using day in and day out, and it's fantastic to see. It really is to see how much people have developed the practice. And so what I said to Pam was, what about if we ask people what else what have we not covered yet, and perhaps also a bit about what we've learned and what we can take forward, because as I say, it's odd now at a point where, rather than trying to tell people that Teams is really useful, everybody knows Teams is really useful, and people are now taking steps beyond where perhaps I am or Pam or anybody else. So it's starting to see people really running where last year perhaps they weren't even walking. So it's absolutely incredible. So that was the kind of theme, I guess, and I hope we can provide something really useful from this session then. The 4 areas I want to look at are there on the screen. And again, learning, teaching, assessment, something we've got, absolutely fantastic educators in Scotland. So not to go back to sucking eggs or anything, but just to look at how that we've developed that, and how the digital has helped us to develop that. So I don't want to tell them how to do learning, teaching, assessment. We can certainly have a look about how we've done that and share some successes from that. I still think it's really important that we think about including families, and that, again, that's as we go forward as well. So it'd be really useful to know how you have engaged with families and any other agencies or support, perhaps CLD, Community Learning Development, and how they've been involved. And again, what's worked for you and your establishment, what's worked well there. And big question about homework, and what role does it play? What does it look like? And in the last wee part, really looking forward and thinking about what do we take forward from here? What's all these individual bits, but really the learning. How is that going to look? Let's put a time on it, but let's potentially And again, I don't think when we go back to school or settings, the first thing we're going to do is redevelop the curriculum. But I think, let's say from August onwards, that next school session, what are our targets going to look like? And I really do expect that they're going to be very different from what they were this year. Let me reset. I put my light on in here. It gets dull very quickly here. So again, you've probably seen this slide from me before, but again, it's something I'm talking to every time. That EEF, the Education Endowment Foundation research, the teaching quality, again, can it directly impact the access to technology? I know Pam and the authority are working really hard on that. Scottish Government have put money into that. Local authority will be putting money towards that. But in terms of accessibility and how learners can access the learning, there's a slide further on in here. I think the immersive reader one, you've probably seen it. Microsoft and Google both give you tools to support access to learning. It's built into web browsers now, mobile devices. Even my laptop's got Cortana built in, which is Microsoft's version of Siri from Apple. So I've got all these devices with accessibility features that can support me to access learning. So again, how do we make the most of that to make sure that there's as little digital divide as possible? We've seen the strength, I'm sure, of peer interactions. You've hopefully been having your learners not just working remotely and independently, but working collaboratively as well. If you have done, it'd be great to see some examples of that, but we can also look forward and think, how do we use that to support learners working collaboratively? I've already mentioned independently along with the collaborations. And again, all I can suggest are examples or suggestions. There isn't an answer to this. There's no right answer. So everybody's got something to contribute, and lots of different types of learning can take place, and it doesn't have to be one model that fits everybody. It might, as we know, not be one model that suits your class. and each of those learners has their own needs. So the more strings you've got for your bow, then the better that's going to be, again, going forward. I've put a link again to the slides, and you can get the QR code or click on the link. I'll share these slides with you at the end as well. I did some work with my literacy and English colleagues at the end of last year, and really focusing on how digital can support and develop learning in literacy and English. So there's lots of research in there, and rather than me having to copy and paste all of Julie's links, I've just shared the slides. So there should be lots of references in those slides, and really thinking about how, I guess, everything we do on the internet or the web is accessing a text of some sort. So be it images, text, or video content or games, those are all texts within Curriculum for Excellence. And again, how do we access and use them? So the first bit I'm going to ask you to do is around these questions about your experiences. So again, thinking back to our Higios, but what is engaging, what's been effective, and how have we assessed, and to what degrees you can be as honest as you like. What has been parts that have worked particularly well, or parts that haven't worked particularly well. So great to share some examples of that. The Jamboard's anonymous, so again, tell us what has and hasn't worked. And again, the two sort of big questions to really come to from that: what are we going to take forward then? So if we can identify these three about the engagement, the effective, and the quality, what are we going to take forward from that? And also, what support do we need? So what next from Pam and myself, or yourselves as a group, with support your colleagues? So you can either, just going to copy that link to the chat, so you can scan the QR code. I'll put the link here in the chat just now, and you can access that. So you're hopefully going to see the Jamboard page here. I can see a load of people already in. So I'm going to suggest using the post-it notes on the left-hand side. It's dead easy to organise. So if you can add in any post-it notes, any thoughts, your ideas around that. So whether it's the engagement, the learning, teaching, or the assessment, or you want to just encapsulate that in one or two comments about what you want to take forward. But again, try to think about this session. I didn't want to come in and tell people how to use Teams again, or how to use forms. The sort of stuff we may have done about a year ago, because I know everybody's taken so many strides in the past year. So it's a point as well to let ourselves know what we can do to take you forward. What do you envisage being your next steps? And we can plan to support that as well. So just take a wee minute and see if anybody wants to pop any thoughts onto the Jamboard. You can use post-its or the text to say post-its are just a wee bit easier to organise. Use a post-it tool there, and we'll see what people are thinking. Or not. Again, easier if we could just pop into the chat if that's easier. Great. So that mix of recorded and live lessons. So if that's something that's been effective, is that something, again, we can consider as we go forward? Is there going to be a need for recorded lessons once we're back to school or our settings? Is that going to be useful? Is that for perhaps broadening our curriculum? Imagining the, let's say, something like philosophy, it wouldn't have been offered in my high school. But if I'd wanted to do that, is that something that we can now deliver, that we can broaden a curriculum? We don't have to have pupils busing between schools, perhaps for certain subjects, and we could use those live lessons. Seeing the teachers, I'm going to presume that's been for engagement, that they're able to see you through the videos and stuff, enjoying the live meets with teachers, using forms to check understanding. So again, I can think of one of my learners that had quite a lot of health issues, was off quite regularly, and would have been a fantastic opportunity to use video calls to bring that people into the class at times. Use of SumDog, we've got use of quizzes as well, and flipped learning to support some of the assessment as well. Whole school Google Meet Assembly. So is that again engagement? I'm thinking always good for health and well-being, and absolutely that's a huge consideration. So again, how would we going to use these tools? Is it for engagement? Is it for, those breakout spaces that, having hot chocolate, as you say, absolutely, and great for health and well-being. Great to see, about the resources, whether it's Sumdog or quizzes. Are these going to be things? How do we use that in the classroom? So at the minute, we're presuming that every learner's got access to a device at some point. Obviously, there's going to be learners that have been left behind, so it's going to be great for them to get back to the class and have access to the teaching uninterrupted. But how are we going to use some of these tools then, again, going forward in flipped learning? Is that something we set as a homework task and then we pick it up on Tuesday in the class? So recorded lessons, live check-ins, access to resources again. So hopefully, as I said, you've got a whole bunch of strings added to your bow here, and we can use those to engage learners back in the class. There'll be management things, again, about, if you get a class of 33 and you get 8 iPads to use, how do you manage that literacy lesson? So there's going to be certainly bits to consider about that, and it'll be interesting to see how people go using. There's a good point about the differentiation, using the recorded lesson, so you could record some content and again flip the learning perhaps for some of your learners. They've got some content to access, and then you could go and work with another group of learners. Absolutely. And finishing again that working from home and school and going between them, that real blended approach. So lots of great examples there. And again, I suppose then the part is what do we need? What support do you require for that? Or can you see what maybe comes next? Or do we need some, again, is that you maybe don't know? I always like that quote from Henry Ford, who said, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they'd have told me faster horses. They obviously didn't know that the motor car was coming. So sometimes you do need somebody to point the way. So again, if you've got people in this group here, it'd be great for people to share what they're doing like this and see where, you might not know that that's the tool. You might have never heard of Sumdog, and to hear about that here might be where you identify that's the next step you need. So definitely important to share this. And the last comment that's just come in there about sharing ideas and resources. You've already got this group that's been working well for a couple of years now, but to see how it's developed and grown arms and legs through the pandemic. So it is something that's definitely better sharing that's happening. But again, if we can continue to build on that, so that again, if somebody's got a good idea, everybody gets access to that good idea and we can take that forward. So feel free to keep adding to that one just now. I'm going to just come out and go back to my slides. And I mentioned about accessibility. We've probably covered those, but I've always got them in the slides in case somebody hasn't or you want to share them with colleagues. The one I'm going to ask next then is about that digital divide. Again, stuff coming here from WEF. I get a report the other day about data poverty, and that's a huge one to consider. I think we've seen the shift to video being really effective. Lets us create high quality teaching resources. However, if you're, let's imagine a secondary pupil, for example, where you've been asked to be online for 4 or 5 different subjects in a day, 9 till 3, if that's where that timetable works out. I'm just saying secondary, because I imagine if I was in my primary class, I wouldn't be asking learners to come online in the morning and the evening or the afternoon for video. I'd pick a point in the day, personally, because I would be considering about data poverty there. If you're accessing it online through your home broadband, a fixed line internet connection, the chances are you've got unlimited data. You can use as much internet as you like, and that's not something that crosses our mind. If you're perhaps like me, and you've complained several times to or every time your contract's up, you negotiate with your mobile provider. So I now get 8 gigabytes of data, which is absolutely tons more than I need because I've got Wi-Fi in the house, so I don't actually need that data a lot of the time. But if you're in a low-income household, there's every chance that you're not getting access to a mobile contract for a start, and that it's perhaps pay-as-you-go. That's something we need to consider. Or that you might have that 8 gigabyte of data in the house, but you've got 3 laptops tethered to it for learners at different ages, and mum or dad or somebody's working as well. So 4 or 5 laptops potentially tethered to 1 or 2 mobiles with a fixed amount of data. And video just eats that up. Being on a Teams call like we are just now is just absolutely devouring that data. And if you start to do that over the course of the whole day, you're very quickly going to go through. And that's not to mention as well that family's got a right to leisure time. So if you're asking to be online all day for school and then they're wanting to be online and watch YouTube and Netflix in the evening, Again, that data doesn't last very long, so it's something we have got to consider about the balance there. But there's a whole part that, again, if we are how we use that when we go back to school, and how we support it. And I'm particularly thinking, as I say, going forward there, about the supporting families and who we're going to use for that. So if I go to the next page on the Jamboard, if you go along to number 2 with me, up at the top there. So what do we need to do for our families? What's worked well during lockdown, and what are we going to do next so when we can start to get our families back into school? When we can have people in the school, or the nursery, or the secondary school, wherever that is, when we can start to have people back in our setting, how are we going to bring their digital skills up to meet ours in the learner? Because it's the one I keep hearing is, my learner gets stuck learning at home, and all of a sudden, mum or dad or somebody's faced with supporting them with Teams and passwords, and there's challenges around that. So any ideas about how we're going to do that to take that forward? And has anybody perhaps already tackled this? Maybe you've set up a blog or a YouTube channel to support families, or again, if you've been working with your CLD colleagues and community learning and development, that might be the sort of ESOL, your language support. It might be adult literacy networks that are supporting families that have, again, we quite often remember the learners that have got support needs, but what about the families that have got that? So again, please feel free to pop them in post-its, any strategies, or again, even any prompts that you can see as being a challenge, and how we're going to try and develop that. And again, it's something we can hopefully work in partnership with our CLD colleagues and see. So the digital champions, someone's already moved it, and I've got to move the text there. So having the digital champions linked to the Connected Scotland devices. So is that you talk about you, the teachers, as digital champions, or the learners, the sort of digital leaders?
It's part of the contract, George. So if they got the Connected Scotland devices, part of that was they had to have digital champions who supported the families. So they offer training. There's a whole host of things that they do to support families that they've given these devices to. So it's really helpful for getting for upskilling those parents.
But that's a fantastic thing to hear that's worked then. And again, I guess that's just about ramping that up and broadening it as everybody starts to be able to come back into our establishments then. So that's really good to hear that's been working for people. So again, building upon that, then that's great to hear that's something that's happened, and that everybody's I guess we can just hopefully just strengthening that then.
Yeah, I mean, it's only a limited number of devices, so it's a limited number of families, but it's a starting point for those families.
Brilliant. And there's somebody else had made a lot of those how-to videos and the basics and things. So again, if we don't hit some of the families with that, hopefully as they start to come back, we can provide that, whether that's an information evening or but yeah, that's something I think we've and as you say, if you've developed that either through the digital champions or because your school's made this content to support families, or your authorities developed those videos, then how do we, let's build on that rather than saying, well, they're all back in school, we don't need that anymore. So that's really good to hear that that's a part of it, and I hope that it does. If anything comes from this, we've hopefully strengthened some of those links. The next bit then I'll move on is to homework. I really want to, homework was one I never liked, nor as a pupil, nor as a teacher. Again, this information coming from some research saying that, it should, again, probably aware of that, short focus tasks. But one thing that I can certainly say about my own practice as well, to start with, I did what everybody else did in my schools, the sort of homework policy. Here's 10 spelling words, write them out 3 times, write me a sentence about them, or do an active spelling strategy. Maths was, we had a maths booklet in my last school, and the expectation was that they got learning from the maths booklet. It hopefully did relate to what they were doing in school, but quite often we did it a kind of block behind. So if we'd been learning about fractions and we'd moved on to decimals, the homework would probably be recovering the fractions. And this part about being built upon in school, and I think that's quite a lot of the time. It might not be the case for your school, but quite a lot of time I've seen that it's spelling. and we might do a wee bit of spelling input on Monday morning, but how often do I pick back up upon that during the week? And I know we've got a really tight timetable for that, but so I'd love to ask that question about how do we develop homework? Have we got an opportunity to really reimagine it? And after what we've seen what learners can do online throughout remote learning and blended learning at the end of last year, but is our homework going to look the same as it did before, or have we got a real opportunity to change that home learning? Can it be, somebody mentioned that flipped learning, something in the first slide that they're definitely going to take forward, and is that going to become part of your homework, that the learners, if they're using a Jamboard like this or a OneNote, and that's where they've got their maths for the day, is there any reason they can't continue with that and build on that at home? Or if they start making a presentation about the World War II or whatever the topic is in class, have they got separate homework tasks, or are they just developing and building on the things that they did in school? So it'd be really interesting to see, people's thoughts around that. Is it that we're going to go back to what we did, or are we going to build shared spaces for collaboration? So again, is homework going to be something that you do in your homework jotter, or is it going to be that kind of project-based learning like this suggestion about the shared spaces? Are we going to make use of those? Or do we want to just go back to you do your homework and I'll do mine and we'll hand it in? Or is there an opportunity here for remote collaborative learning to go on? Could Pam and I be working on a PowerPoint collaboratively for homework, and that's something we're working at Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, present it in class on Friday? Have we thought about that? Have we got ideas around that? So again, that consolidating the learning. So what does it look like? Does it just be the same? So again, that audio feedback with the OneNote perhaps, or is that using something like Mote? We've got digital jotters. Again, does it have to be something separate, or how do you split it? So someone's been using Google Classroom for homework, so hopefully I'm presuming that's a dead easy one to keep going with for organising it. And so completing homework on Seesaw after the last lockdown. So we're going to go back, are we going to go away from Google Classroom and Seesaw, or is that something that's now embedded? But what about the activities that lets us do? And that's what, again, really thinking, is it, are we using Classroom and Seesaw to do the same tasks we did in class, or are we going to ask them to do something different now that we've kind of envisaged it? We've used ThingLink. Is ThingLink going to become a homework task, or is it still going to be writing spelling words in a list? And I know certainly towards the end of my time in school, I started to kind of really think about that and thinking about how I can do it. And there's good quality feedback. That was part of the reason I really hated it, was the amount of time I had to spend marking homework sometimes, and you thought the learners felt they'd handed it in and it was gone, and by the time I'd marked it, they weren't going back and looking at it really, and it wasn't having that impact. So could I use things like forms and OneNote? Somebody's already mentioned about audio feedback. So can I actually make it more meaningful and relevant than just a hufty, something they have to do for Friday? It needs to be handed in, it's got to be marked, and it's going to be given back. Could we actually use it to be more effective? So yeah, things to think about there. If I move on to the next wee part, talk about cyber resilience and internet safety, one I always talk about, but I've seen bits and pieces of numbers floating about over the past year, and they're horrifying. If I remember it right, it's about 900% of an increase in child abuse cases in the UK. No 900 cases, 900% increase in child basically sexual abuse, sexual exploitation online, because they're spending more of their time online than ever. I guess as well, there's a lot of those adults who would exploit and abuse children online have more access or more private access to the internet. Let's say where an offender would perhaps be discouraged from making contact with a minor because they've got to go to work in the office and it's a public space, and whereas now they're working from home and they can access their private laptop throughout the whole day. So it's a very different landscape, a very different environment, not a very nice one. And I say that number is 900%, could easily be higher than 900%. And it's an astounding figure when you think about that. So I think we've got more of a duty than ever to really consider where cyber resilience and internet safety fits in our curriculums in school. And again, something to We've just come out of Safer Internet Day. We've got Cyber Scotland Week coming up, starting on Monday, to raise those awareness raisers. But for me, it's something again we should be teaching at least once a week as part of, whether it's health and well-being, part of my literacy, my numeracy, my maths more likely, but wherever it fits in those sort of curricular areas that we've all got responsibility for. We've got lots of workshops coming up next week and webinars to look at that, but I could only, I don't think I'd stress it enough, that the impact it's having on our children and young people, and I think we've got a bigger role than ever to really support them through the past year that they've experienced online, and again how they move forward from there. So for me, there's really I want to put that out there. I think a real focus on cyber resilience and internet safety and how we take that forward. Going forward, I'll show you as well. Also, we've rejigged our DigiLearn site for cyber resilience and internet safety. We've got the kind of video here explaining the difference between the two parts, what's cyber and what's internet safety. How are they different, and how do you teach either of them? We've got things like we've even now started putting together a podcast, so again you can just listen to it when you're out on a walk in your phone rather than having to sit and watch a YouTube video which needs your screen to be on. So we've tried to really cover some more of that, and we've started this section here about where to start with it and taking it step by step. So what is each one? What does it look like as part of health and well-being? This one I added the other day about information literacy and Chris, so really looking at a literacy and English aspect of how do we believe what we read, and how do we evaluate and make sense of, false claims, for example, and fake news. And that was a big focus for Safer Internet Day. We've been working on it since about November last year and really trying to think about where does it sit, and it sits very firmly for me. It's literacy and English skills, and it's that knowledge and information, knowledge and understanding about the contexts of our cyber, our connected lives. So try to develop that section here, and again try to point where you can go next with those, and really try to build some progression in. So it's a work in progress, but we've kind of overhauled this, and we think there's a lot more to come, I think, around cyber resilience and internet safety from our schools and our learning establishments. So that's just a kind of bit for me. It's a big focus on Chris, but I think we've got digital literacy across the curriculum. And again, you and your learners have developed all these skills. So where do we go next? We're more confident with things like Google Classroom, but where does that creativity, if you're more confident in that, how do you go back? Are we going to go look at video editing? Are we going to look at web development? Are we going to look at, games for text? Or have we got a wee bit more confidence to try other areas as well? And also about computing science. So really try to think again with that, really looking for, as we spelling mistake there, really thinking about that wider curriculum and how we use digital to develop our other areas, but also how we develop the technology side. So again, I've got another wee Jamboard page, and it'd be great to see some examples if we go to page 4 on the Jamboard. And it'd be great to hear from you that the ones that you have maybe either already got your eye on, these are the areas we want to develop, or again, even just to put questions up about, how you could develop, for example, computing science or cyber resilience, and the area that you'd like support from myself, Pam, Ross, or anybody else that's happy to support those things. So have you started to think about it, or is this kind of we're still just thinking about getting through the current, or have we had a moment to? And again, I appreciate absolutely it might not be top of the agenda, but I think we announcements the last couple of days and today, there's maybe a bit of light at the end of the tunnel, and some of our learners are going to start to return to the settings, and hopefully more will follow sooner than later. But there is going to come a point where we are back in our settings, and we will have to think about school improvement plans. So talk about resources required for computing science. There's absolutely hundreds of resources available. We've tried to curate quite a few of them, and happy to point towards some of those. Just frustratingly, they don't quite sit in DigiLearn Scott, so we are looking at where they might sit. There is a PLC we've got on SharePoint, which just doesn't get quite as much traffic as DigiLearn. So It's something we're hoping to do some sessions around computing science and think where that sits, and I can happily signpost you loads of free online resources there. A wee bit harder when it comes to maybe the physical resources. That's certainly something you have to consider as well. I'm sure Pam will have many ideas, and sure others will as well, about how you share devices in school. There'll be sort of health and safety considerations for that. In terms of the CRISP badge, it's actually one I really need to go and have a look at. I think it's based in the same framework as the rest of the Digital Schools Award. I did have a look at it, I think, when we spoke about Digital Schools Award. Was that back in January, Pam? I think so.
Yeah.
I think it was back then. I had a wee look at the CRISP badge, and it looks like very much the same kind of criteria, but again, it's looking for your policies and your practices. And
yeah, I mean, we've got digital schools are coming next week. I think it's Monday, and they're running a session for us, and I've asked them to touch on what are the requirements for the CRISP stuff as well, because I think a few schools have mentioned it. I know a lot of you are focusing on your Digital School Award just now, but it's the badge bit. I know some of you have mentioned it, so I've asked them to do a wee input on that bit, just to talk about what it looks like, what it means, so that we can look at what can we do to support you. And I know that a few of you have mentioned about collaborating on your Digital Schools Awards, on your policies and stuff like that. And that ties in with exactly what George was saying earlier around, we've got this DLC team. You guys have been absolutely tremendous at answering each other's questions, posting questions, and using that as a great channel. So I'm quite happy if we want to set up a space that's just for Digital Schools Awards, for your policies and things like that. And if people want to drop them in and share, happy to host a session where we come together and talk about it, for those of you after the session next week, for those of you who are keen to collaborate together.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point that you've raised there as well, Pam. About those next steps in developing the practitioners, it appears that more scope for us to do that more individualised. So again, if you've got even a small group of people who want to take that curriculum development forward, who want to maybe do a bit of work around doing the CRISP badge and developing something in the curriculum around that, for myself to be able to support that, more than happy to. And again, whether it's a sort of smaller working party about computing science, happy to support and develop those across kind of the authority or in clusters to help take that forward. And I suppose the big bit I was really looking for towards here is that digital literacy across the curriculum. So it's great that our learners are all probably more confident, say, with the likes of G Suite and Office 365, and probably as well with I know we've done work with ThingLink and a book creator or anything else. But again, where does that start to really get embedded? That it changes some of the practice. So does Google Earth become part of your social subjects, your social studies? Is that something that we routinely use? Are you starting to
see? If we can get it working on our Chromebooks, George, it will.
Has that been an issue?
There's a call.
Google Earth, George.
I always kind of blind. I always feel like I say that wrong thing, and it's like, everywhere I go. So I suppose there's that part, but really thinking, or I suppose at least what I want to do is go away for today's session and think about, I've got better at this, my learners are better at that, their families are better at that, but what do we want to do next? And I'm hoping it comes to that. We've always said it in our team about, we don't want digital consumers, we want digital creators. So we don't want them to be able to watch or access YouTube. We want them to be making YouTube. We want our learners to know how to make websites, how to create and edit video content, and to really think about those applications of the knowledge and understanding. So stuff to consider then, I say certainly as we go forward. I'm happy to support with that. And again, that was going to be my perfect segue, and as Pam said, they're really lighting up with the Digital Schools Award. If you've made all these strides this year, you're probably already coming close to being eligible to get the accreditation for Digital Schools Award. And I think the amount of work that everybody's done this year is certainly will have put you almost there, if not way beyond the expectations for that. I know there's been an update to it about blended learning, but again, I don't imagine there's going to be anything in there that's going to come as a surprise, because I can guess what, you've been delivering blended learning in some stage or form for months, whether that was the starting to return to school and having some learners in and some learners out, or whether you were in or out of school. And again, even working remotely, you've got all those strategies, you've probably got the policies in place. And as you say, Pam, if there's a group leaders that are kind of coming together to develop those policies, then that's absolutely something to take advantage of. And really thinking about your school improvement plan. So again, that's where I would be thinking, if you're developing, whether it's your curriculum or your own practice, your staff have probably come up to a level, your colleagues, your learners have probably made huge strides. So it's all thinking about what do we do next. Digital schools would be a great one to get, and then thinking about where that's hopefully going to point you in the next direction to go.
I think, George, when I think about when we first started talking about this last year, we were saying, wouldn't it be great if our schools could capitalise on the first lockdown and really go for their Digital School Awards? And I know a lot of you have been doing that. Obviously, we've come into another period of lockdown, which has slowed us up again, which is why I thought, let's have the session with the DSA team. But I do think everything you're saying is chiming with me, George, because I know it's something that our schools are keen to prove what progress they've made since last year, because we know it's been huge. And I know not all of you have been using Google Classroom or Teams. I know you've been using things like Seesaw. I know you've been using things like Glow Blogs. I know you've been tweeting your work and things like that. So you've come at it in a way that's appropriate for your context and what you know that your families and your learners can cope with. So if you're one of the schools who've maybe not been making use of Google Classroom or Teams, that's something that you might want to start dipping your toe in the water with when they come back into school. And obviously that all ties back to what you're doing for the Digital School Awards as well.
Yeah, no, it's great, as you say, when we started to talk about the digital schools last year, and to see it all kind of come into fruition is absolutely fantastic. And as you say as well, people will know best where they need to go. And again, I guess today was a kind of moment of reflection, and certainly to be able to feed back to, certainly for me to think, where do me and my team at Education Scotland go, and the DigiLearn team, what do you need next from us? Because again, we've created lots of content, lots of support around the office and G Suite. We've done some of the extra bits like Book Creator, ThingLink, Quizlets and Padlets and things. So we've tried to really explore the kind of platforms as well as the pedagogies. But really, what can we do for you next? That's the bit. We've got some plans underway, but again, we just want to make sure that they are what people are looking for. What I've added at the end of these slides as well, then, stuff that you've perhaps seen from other sessions, but I've just added them in because I think there's always people that miss sessions and join this group, and people coming and going. So just to make sure nobody's missed any of these, that the real focus for us has been that flipped approach, and because of the equity. So for the digital learning teaching team, we would say our preference has been towards flipped learning, because it really takes consideration of the equitable, or the equity of the access. By flipping the learning, that creating content, giving it to learners, it also fosters that metacognitive strategies about independent learners, and really helps them to move forward with their thinking, their understanding. So there's a whole host of reasons that we've taken that stance. So what I've put together there is a slide that hopefully kind of summarises the use of assignments within Classroom or Teams, or again, if you're using other platforms, they'll have their own version of assignments, but that creating a task that contains everything that your learner needs. So whether it's a video slide, however the information is presented to the learner, you've also got the material. So again, I always say, if I'm asking my learners to write a bit of paper in my classroom, I would be handing out the bits of paper. If I want them to use a jotter, I'm handing out the jotters. If I want them to make Christmas crackers, I've got to provide them with the materials to make Christmas crackers. So when I'm providing them with online learning, I should be providing them that resource in the same place. That's why I would say assignments. I can get my learning intention, my success criteria, I've got instructions, I've got information, whether it's videos, slides, etc. I've got the whiteboard, or a Word document, or
any website I need them to access. Everything's in one place. And then again, dip my toe, going back to that metacognition and those strategies for really developing learners, and again, in a wee bit further depth there, and thinking about retrieval practice. Forms are absolutely perfect. I mean, absolutely can use forms for a whole different variety of uses, but I think they can really enter their own for that low stakes quizzing that supports retrieval practice. So again, really try to think about how my practice would change with all these tools. And then again, I've put at the end there that wee bit about getting and I can only imagine that iPads have been a wee bit harder to come by for learners, and it's a lot easier, I think, to plan for using something like an iPad in a classroom or an educational setting, because you kind of know how many iPads are there. If you know you've got 8 between 33, you know there's 8. Whereas if you ask a learner to go and use iMovie to create a video at home, you don't necessarily know that every learner's get equal access to that. So I think I'd love to see people making that step on from the whiteboards and the quizzes. We've seen so much good practice with those, but how, when we get back to school, and I think as well with that real focus on health and well-being, that it's no the learning is necessarily bums and seats, and that we really do take that time to explore learners' experiences over the past year and how they reflect on that, and hopefully being more creative with video and animation. And if you so feel inclined, if you get access to things like your iPads and you want to use GarageBand to make songs, it's probably not a webinar I'm going to deliver. I'm happy to try my hand at it, but certainly knowing the musical creation side. So I'd love to again be able to support that. Hopefully, I think we've seen a lot of this part. This has become really effective practice from a lot of people, real high quality teaching. And what again I'd love to be able to support is that creativity as we go forward. And again, I think there is a part about equity. It's difficult to say everybody go and make a video using iMovie when again the iPad really comes into its own for those free apps that work on the device, whereas if everybody's using a mobile phone, it's harder to manage that. So bits there I think to consider. I put examples in, just talking about literacy and some literacy and numeracy examples. Again, hopefully you've seen these in other sessions from me. Again, if you've not, hopefully they're useful if you want to share them with a colleague, and it saves you having to make your own videos or go and find them on our YouTube channel. They're here. Again, working with my English and literacy colleagues, screening shots. I don't know if you've got any further with that, Pam, bringing that up again. And if you don't, there's access to word waves as well, which is, especially for younger learners, it's not requiring any Glow login, but you can use word waves. And it's a fantastic resource for BBC Bite Size about using video for a text. Again, I'd love to see more and more educators with things like games as a text. Your learners are all playing Among Us. Could we use that? Could we capitalise upon that for engagement, use that as a text and create some learning around that? So a couple of examples of using those resources.
Sorry to interrupt, Josh, just on screening shots. You've landed me in it again, cheers. Still doing the PIA for that, still trying to get that signed away, so I will get round to actually finalising that and getting it done. It's just the requirements from Education Scotland just now are a bit...
I think I also need to point out that Ross is getting pulled in about 10 different directions at the minute in digital, which is only supposed to be a small part of his time. Could easily be full-time, but he's not allowed. He's a CMIS man as well, George, so I'll just leave that.
This is it. So, no, thanks for backing me up there, Pam. Appreciate it. Cheers.
No, again, apologies for bringing, because I know we've spoken about that before. And what I would say is that a lot of the films you'll find in screenshots are available on YouTube as well. But again, even going back to that, I just reference screenshots because it's in Glow and it's a way for YouTube. Again, I used to use like Roadrunner cartoons from YouTube and snippets of other films that might be available freely through YouTube. So I would use some of those as well for texts. And again, really thinking about how do we get are our learners chomping at the bit to be back in our schools and early year centres because we can give them reading books, Biff, Chip and Kipper again? Is that what they're really excited about coming back to school for? Or are we going to engage them with the kind of exciting learning that we've planned throughout lockdown and blended learning and all the other things that we've covered this year? are we going to be going back to reading books because we can get them, or can we broaden the kind of variety of text that we use? So that's why referencing those. Probably seen this again if you've seen any of our literacy and English stuff from my colleagues in the team. They created this based on that national literacy audit, and I think for me, I'm like, that's a win. Again, anytime I'm working online, the web is a tool. It's a text. Sorry, the web is a text. Every website I look at is a text. Every video, every song I listen to or we look at is a text. And I think these before, during, and after strategies are fantastic. I'd be making massive use of those to, again, think about if I'm using the web, if we're looking at a website, we're doing some research. How do I use this before reading, before, during, and after to look at a website and to analyse that. I've also put in a link to the reading strategies document that I'm trying to see if that's my work. No, I think that's a copy of this. Yep, it's just a copy of that table there. I think the reading on screen strategies I shared at the start. Useful. There's the link. That's what I was looking for. The Alex Quigley reading on screen. So again, every time we ask a learner to look at information on a screen, they comprehend it less than if they looked at an actual book or a printed text. So again, the strategies that we use to develop that, lots of it is about note making. But again, when we start to go back into our settings and we can model, we can actually stand in front of our class and look at the whiteboard at the front. How do we model looking at a text on a screen? Do we zip up and down? Do we skim it? Where Alex Quigley's research would say we should be scanning it. So again, that's something to consider, how we model scanning, how we model highlighting and picking out words and texts on a screen. We're going to have to do a lot of that when we go back, so learners haven't seen us modelling reading for a long time in many cases. So how do we do that with screens? Put in a wee example there as well, just an example where we used that sort of quadrant analysis for some literacy. So again, just because it's an engaging tool with Jamboard, but we've seen that being used again today. Lots of content from my literacy and English colleagues, well worth looking at, useful for just now, useful for going back to school. On our numeracy and maths examples, again, really thinking about, here's some examples, sticking to OneNote and Jamboard. I know my colleagues in the numeracy and maths team talk lots about MathSpot. It's been suggested that Toy Theatre, this teacher tools, might be just maybe more inviting to younger learners than MathSpot, so a wee bit more colourful, easier in the eye perhaps. But how you can use those tools, and again, when I was talking about homework and what we think about what does learning at home, what's that going to look like going forward? Because if we are taking, let's say, and I'm sure lots of schools are across Renfrewshire will be doing that kind of concrete, pictorial and abstract, and really thinking about your understanding in numeracy and maths, your number awareness. So when we go to learning at home, are we just asking to do a bunch of calculations like we used to? Or if you're asking them to do fraction bars, if that's the strategies that they're using in the class, then how do they use these tools at home? Have you invested in a full set of concrete materials for every learner? Is that something that we've got access to? And I very much doubt it, that there'll be schools handing out whole class sets of concrete materials. But again, even thinking about something as simple as coins, probably taking for granted that the learners will get handfuls of cash. They might not, because income, or they might be like me, and I don't remember the last time I spent cash. So I really like the fact that we've got those online interactive materials. Is that something that we want to think about in terms of numeracy and maths, about how we use these tools to develop our learning at home, so that it's not just what it used to look like? Maybe we're already using these, so again, it'd be great to hear from people who are, and how you use either MathSpot or Toy Theatre or something like those to, again, develop things that they're doing in class. Those same materials, you can have a virtual version of them that your learners can use at home. So if they've not got a counting stick at home, they can use this one to support the strategies that you've been developing in class. And I know, I can only imagine the frustration. You've probably had massive strides with those kind of CPA approaches in class in the past year or so, and then learners have been out of school for a year and they've probably had lots of, very likely that adults have been showing them formal strategies or this is the way I learned it, and it's maybe at odds with what you've been trying to develop. So it'd be great if we could work out how to use those to again support those strategies we do in the class at home. Put some examples on. That was just an activity that I did. And what we got was, it could look like this. So using those MathSpot and toy theatres, here's my understanding of the number 37, just using a range of the tools that are on there. And that was done in a Jamboard. So just using Microsoft, Google Jamboard that we've done today, I can snip those images, and I've even put a wee video just showing how I've used snipping tool on my Windows laptop to take a screenshot. If you've got a mobile device and an iPad, screenshot it, and you can insert an image to your Jamboard. But how I can take images from MathSpot and build up something like that. And I'm thinking I could have a page of calculations done formally, or I could have a page of learning that looks like that. And having worked with my numeracy maths colleagues, this certainly shows that I know more about my number than doing a page of calculations could possibly do me. So there's a place for a page of calculations, but if we want to really get our learners going into depth of their understanding, then you've got the opportunity to use a tool like that. Is this a response to homework? Is this what our homework could look like? And learners are able to use these tools at home where they maybe don't have them in class, they don't have them at home at the moment. The last wee part, again, just as ever, lots of good input in the Jamboard today, and again, that's still open, so you can keep adding to that, and hopefully that's useful for yourselves, Pam and Ross, and everybody else in the team. Maybe go and have a look as well and see what people have fed back and maybe identifying some areas from that. But we'd love to hear from you on the DigiLearn Scott site. If you can, if you get a spare 5-10 minutes somewhere, we'd love to hear from you, your stories, your community, and we've got over 100 stories now, a couple of sentences, a paragraph. There's conveniently one of your teachers from Johnston High submitted one last week about using forms to support biology and science learning. So it's those wee stories just about how they've done it and why it's been beneficial. We'd love for you to be able to contribute and to get more people from Renfrewshire contributing to that, to paint that national picture. So there's lots of examples there, whether it's using forms, using Bebras, iPads. So again, 5-10 minutes, just a quick summary of something that you've developed, and it's really valuable to add that to the community where people can come and see how you've done it, and it might just be that wee spark that they need, or even for yourself, just writing up can sometimes have that wee bit when you really sit and reflect on it. Sometimes it takes writing it out to get you to reflect on it, and you can see the steps that you have made. So hopefully it's useful for you as well. But we'd love to hear more. We'd love to add more Renfrewshire voices to that. And that's the last wee bit from me. We've still got some time, so if there's any questions, happy to take questions or talk to any points that we put into the Jamboard, or if you want to put them into the chat. But that's everything from me. I hope it's been useful. Certainly a wee bit different from the way that we have delivered, but I just felt there was so much progress made this year that